If you walked away from Sinners feeling like you missed something, you weren't alone. What you felt was the frequency shift, like the film was saying something and you couldn't quite hear it, like a radio station you couldn't quite tune into. That's because Sinners isn't structured like a normal horror film. It's structured like a myth, and myths don't explain themselves. They repeat, rhyming across centuries. Twins who can't both survive. Music born from suffering. A monster who offers love, but only if you become like him. Once you see the pattern, the whole film changes. Let me show you what it's really doing. In folk tales, the doppelgänger, or double, is a harbinger of imminent death. If you were to pass yourself, your double, in the street, you would soon die. This is a symbol deeply embedded in the human psyche and our mythologies, such as Romulus and Remus, Cain and Abel, and Luke and Vader. The opening of the film shows brief, almost subliminal flashes of horror. But the way the two main characters, twin brothers Smoke and Stack, are played by the same actor is meant to put you on edge, to make you feel there's a shadow of death hanging over the story, even when the first half of the film is primarily concerned with character building and domestic problems, with only a short scene of violence, played mostly for comedy. But the threat of death is always there. The use of the image of the doppelganger in Sinners also represents the choices we make, and this is linked to its representation of death. In Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, she describes a fantastical fig tree which can only provide one single fruit, because once any of the figs are picked, the whole tree withers and dies. Choice is annihilation. Every path taken kills the selves we might have been. Smoke and Stack embody that split. Two paths growing from the same root. Some choices are made for us before we're even born. Some are forced. Some are constrained, but there is always at least a sliver of agency. And in Sinners, that sliver is all the characters have, because they live under such tight restrictions, their options narrowed by circumstance. Yet the path they take still determines what survives and what dies. This is where Sinners uses the symbols and language of mythology. What is mythology? Mythologies are the stories, true and imagined, which are the foundations of cultures. Joseph Campbell studied mythologies from civilizations all around the world, and in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, he argues that myths, old and new, are really the same stories. They all have the same fundamental plot points. The Jesus story is the same as the Buddha story. The story of Romulus and Remus is the same as the story of Cain and Abel. We call this the monomyth. He argues that, while geographical separation adds distinctive details to these myths, the reason these stories endure for millennia is that they express universal aspects of the human psyche. When interpreting the meaning of works of art, the intention of the author is important, but what's more important is how these symbols relate to the collective consciousness. For example, when D.W. Griffith made The Birth of a Nation in 1915, it was a sensation. It elevated the perception of cinema from disposable to indispensable, from low to high art. Films before this played in grimy flea pits, and films afterwards played in grand theatres, with box seats and heavy, thick, luxurious curtains drawn in front of the screen. And for almost 100 years subsequent to that, cinema, particularly American cinema, was arguably the single most important and persuasive art form of Western culture. Griffith's intention with the film was to make an exciting, swashbuckling adventure story, but what he actually made was a recruitment film for the Ku Klux Klan, and lynchings rose fivefold following the film's release. The intention was trumped by the symbolism. The setting of 1930s Deep South Jim Crow America is itself a symbol. A time after slavery in America had been formally abolished, but several decades before the civil rights movement. Many of the characters work on plantations picking cotton, and the cotton fields seem to stretch on to infinity. In all the driving sequences in the film, endless cotton fields stretch out in every direction, as if the whole country were one massive plantation. Cotton picking is a symbol of oppression and inequality. Cotton picking is arduous and slow and painful, and was unable to be mechanized at this point in history. It required delicate fingerwork, but the area of the cotton plant which produces the balls of cotton is defended by hard and sharp spikes, so frequent injury is common among cotton pickers. This made it a perfect crop to be harvested by people who didn't have real feelings, who didn't bleed real blood. But even though these plantation workers were no longer slaves, they were still held down with poverty wages, insurmountable debt, and a legal system which codified their inequality. Vampires are also a symbol. The myth of vampires warned young women about the life-ruining dangers of sexual indiscretion. The vampire of folk tradition is a tall, dark stranger, hypnotically charming, who disappears with the dawn and leaves his victims as a tainted and ravenous creature, no longer able to mingle with decent society in broad daylight. Blood is frequently used in mythology as a symbol for sex and reproduction. The vampire's singular thirst for blood is his only desire. Though handsome and charming and full of sweet promises, he's really only after one thing. Modern popular culture has developed vampires into much more of a sexual symbol. Our culture considers sex appeal to be heavily reliant on youthfulness, and vampires in many modern films are barely evil, and instead represent the ageless sex appeal of the mystically stopped clock. But the vampires of Sinners are not purely sexual seducers. Their power is different. Their power is violent.
And we'll all go together to a wild mountain thyme, all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go?
Their power is to twist the resentment of the oppressed into the monstrous violence of oppression. Once turned, the vampires love Remick, and love their vampire family with a manic passion. The ritual of dancing and singing is like an orgiastic communion. The vampires are a cult, a demonic family unit which promises complete acceptance, belonging, and pure love, but delivers tyrannical dependence and hierarchy. So why is Remick Irish? Why not a plantation owner? Why not a clansman? Because the film is doing something more uncomfortable. Whiteness wasn't always stable. White people are a political fiction, like Judeo-Christian values. The human race is African. The fiction of white people was created to justify slavery. The story went that white people were created in God's image and are the only real people with real souls destined for paradise, whereas racialized groups are closer to an animal or ape.
Might as well ask what the difference is between a white man and a baboon.
Slavery was most horrifically perpetrated against black people, but a lot of people don't know that until partway into the 20th century, other nationalities like Irish and Italian people were not allowed admittance to the white race. White imperialist propaganda claimed that these people were also subhuman apes, which morally justified atrocities like the Irish potato famine. What we call the Irish potato famine was actually an act of genocide perpetrated by the English against the Irish, depopulating almost half the country through starvation and emigration. There was a potato famine which started in 1847, caused by a fungal infection of the potato crops. But Ireland was a very fertile country which produced luxurious masses of other food. But the Irish, subhumans enslaved by the English, were only permitted to eat potatoes, while all the fresh meat, fish and vegetables were transported to England under armed guard. Ireland at this time was a nation of slaves, producing luxuries for their English masters. And then something changed in the 20th century. They were absorbed, not by dismantling the system, but by joining it, by moving from the bottom to enforcing the structure that once excluded them. That's vampirism, not just feeding, but assimilating. Remick carries the memory of colonial oppression. He talks about what was done to his people by the English, who not only brought Christianity to Ireland, but forced it on them, erasing their indigenous identity. But he doesn't reject the system that enslaved them, he perfects it. And that's the shift the film wants you to notice. Oppression doesn't just break people, sometimes it trains them. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good, it's supposed to. Notice the pattern. The plantation extracts labor, the vampires extract blood, the system extracts identity. Different masks for the same hunger. When he arrives in the film, Remick claims that he is being hunted and hurt by Choctaw Native Americans. We know that this is a lie, but this is something that all great oppressors do, insist that they are the victims, even as they commit acts of unspeakable cruelty. Even the leaders who have been exceptionally privileged and benefited from the system their whole lives can still claim to be victims of a cruel system. This kind of shamelessness is a powerful tool of oppression to obfuscate the power structures and lay blame on the oppressed. All of the characters who become vampires and sinners are victims of oppression. What Sinners tells you is that victims of oppression can be turned into monsters. And this is where the film gets dangerous, because it stops talking about monsters and starts talking about culture. Why does Sinners care so much about music? Because this music is testimony. Because systems can extract labor, they can extract wealth, they can even extract blood, but they can't easily extract soul. Soul, the kind of indefinable quality expressed through music. Sammy plays Delta blues, a type of American folk music, and the songs that Remick and his followers sing are Irish folk songs, two folk traditions born from suffering. This is not the opera or the symphonies that aristocrats listen to. This is the working class music of the oppressed. Remick wants Sammy's talent, his ability to express the suffering of the plantation workers, so that they can be more easily absorbed into his cult. Remick doesn't just want Sammy's blood, he wants his voice. He wants to fold this power of communication into his mitt, to expand his influence and persuasiveness. Because if you control the music, you control how the suffering is remembered. Under American capitalism, blues music developed into jazz and later rock and roll. Both of these forms of music were co-opted by the white establishment and sanitized of their original meaning, becoming elevator music and yacht rock. Record companies diluted and redirected that anger and turned it into a commodity. Pain becomes a product, suffering becomes a brand. That's absorption. Rap music and hip-hop was also a development of this music of the oppressed. Certain rap music was an attempt to take the racist propaganda that black people are inherently more violent than white people and romanticize this myth. To take ownership of the racist propaganda and turn it into art. When MOP say,
even ballistics won't be able to tell how to drag them halfway down the block.
They're saying, yes, I am violent, and you're right to fear me. In fact, I'm so violent that my guns even defy the laws of physics. This is as untrue as the claim that black people are more violent than white people. The myth of America is of the land of opportunity, the promised land where hard work can be transmogrified into gold.
I remember Daddy told me fairy tales can come true. You gotta make them happen. It all depends on you.
Smoke and Stack purchased a place of business, hoping to celebrate the black culture of the plantation workers and make some money in the process. But they quickly realized the limited spending power of the plantation workers meant their dream would be virtually impossible to realize. Even if this were not an obstacle, the very next day after selling the mill to the twins, Hogwood and the clan return to kill Smoke and Stack to ensure black-owned businesses could never function. The myths that black people are intellectually inferior and violent and incapable of lifting themselves out of poverty is perpetuated through structural inequalities. And if that fails, murder. So how do the twins signify agency? Romulus and Remus were twin brothers raised by wolves. When it came time to choose a place to found their home, they disagreed on the location, fought, and Remus was killed. Romulus then founded the city of Rome, and whatever alternative history may have arisen from Remus as the founder ceased to exist. Smoke chose a self-destructive form of violence, but Stack chooses a mythological form of violence and returns decades later, draped in the iconography of hip-hop culture. While the violence of hip-hop culture is a persona, a performance, he wears ostentatious gold because through this myth, he has achieved the power he never could have under Jim Crow's America. But he has lost his soul. Stack was always the likable twin, but now he seems cold and dead. The twinkle in his eye has become a flame of eternal hunger. When talking to Sammy in the 90s, Stack says he prefers the old music to the electrified blues. He calls this old music the real. He misses the real. Realness is something he had to surrender to become what he became.
Traveling, I don't know why the hell.
One of the twins burnt out with rage, and the other was assimilated and became an oppressor. This is where the film stops being historical and becomes prophetic. There is a progression from Delta blues to gangster rap, and it's the same as the progression from being oppressed to becoming an oppressor. Myths don't explain themselves, they explain us. Maybe Sinners isn't showing that monsters exist. Maybe it's showing how they're made. The plantations didn't disappear, they evolved. The fields became systems. The overseers became institutions. The chains became promises. Work hard, wait your turn, you'll make it. But what if you don't? What if the only way to escape humiliation is to join the thing that humiliated you? That's vampirism. Not the fangs, the assimilation. We see this pattern repeated across history. A persuasive cult-like leader uses the language of the oppressed to transform the victims of oppression into bloodthirsty monsters. Remick doesn't conquer anyone. He offers them a way to stop feeling small. And that's always more powerful than subjugation through fear. Smoke refuses the system and it destroys him. Stack survives, but only by becoming myth instead of man. And that's the mythology in Sinners, the transformation of violence. The moment suffering stops asking for justice and starts demanding power and blood. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you found this interesting, please consider liking and subscribing.